Britain's MPs vote for an extension from the European Union. The Prime Minister remains determined to get her deal through Parliament. How will EU leaders respond? And where does the Brexit process go from here? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Hazem, Sika. Back my deal or risk losing Brexit altogether? That is what British Prime Minister Theresa May is telling MPs. With just 2 weeks to go until the scheduled leave date on March 29th, MPs voted on Thursday to delay Brexit until at least June. And once again, the Brexit scenario is as murky as ever. There could be a long delay, an exit with May's deal, a disorderly exit without a deal, or even another referendum. Paul Brennan reports from London.
What a mess. The UK Parliament is divided and deadlocked. A delay to Brexit now seems inevitable. The only question is, for how long? The government says rejecting Theresa May's deal would narrow the options to just one.
We would be faced with the prospect of choosing only a long extension, during which the House would need to face up to the choices in front of it and the consequences of the decisions that it has taken.
The government's proposal was to ask the EU for a one-off extension until June the 30th, to allow time for a third attempt by Theresa May to have her twice rejected Brexit deal pushed through Parliament. But with just 10 working days left before the March 29th deadline, MPs are feeling exasperated and rebellious. And an attempt by one group to seize control of parliamentary time next Wednesday was only narrowly defeated by just 2 votes. A separate amendment proposing another Brexit referendum was rejected by a majority of 249 votes. And the main government motion passed by a comfortable 210.
The ayes to the right, 412. The noes to the left, 202.
I think we're moving towards, potentially, as a result of this week in Parliament, a softer Brexit, because that's the only route now to a majority. Although, if those on the right of Theresa May's party realise this, then there could be one final push towards her deal.
The European Union is exasperated too. The EU leaders' summit is next Thursday in Brussels, and if Theresa May's deal is rejected a third time by Parliament next Tuesday, some leaders aren't minded to grant the UK an extension at all.
What is the intention of the British Parliament? What are the choices of the British authorities? And I am not sure that we need more time, we need more decision.
In Washington, the Irish Prime Minister discussed Brexit with the US President. Donald Trump said he'd given Theresa May some negotiating advice that she hadn't taken.
I think it could have been negotiated in a different manner, frankly. I hate to see everything being ripped apart right now. I don't think another vote would be possible because it would be very unfair to the people that won.
In all the confusion, though, one thing has become clear. Unless the EU rejects the UK request, Britain is not leaving the European Union as scheduled on March 29th. Paul Brennan, Al Jazeera, Westminster.
So what happens now? Well, delaying Brexit can happen only if European Union leaders approve. All 27 must unanimously agree to extend Article 50, the clause in the EU treaty for the United Kingdom to leave. Theresa May says the extension shouldn't be longer than 3 months. She says she'll try for a third time to get her withdrawal deal passed by the House of Commons next Wednesday. If this fails, May will seek more time. And the delay could mean the UK has to take part in European Parliament elections in May. Well, let's bring in our guest now. In London is Catherine McBride, Senior Economist in the International Trade and Competition Unit at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Joining us via Skype from Chisinau, Moldova, is Donnacha Olbekoin, Associate Professor at the School of Law and Government at Dublin City University. And in Berlin, we have Jon Worth, a European Union Affairs blogger and visiting lecturer at the College of Europe in Bruges. Welcome, all three of you. Good to have you with us. Let me start with you, Catherine McBride, in London, since you are where it is all happening. British Prime Minister Theresa May is planning to get this withdrawal agreement into Parliament again on Tuesday to try for a third time, even though it's been defeated convincingly twice before. What do you think MPs should do?
I'm not sure what she's planning on doing. She's already announced, or at least people are already talking about bringing it back for a fourth time. The people who are opposing it are not just people like the DUP, who have a very definite problem with the Irish backstop. And obviously, you hear a lot about the European Research Group opposing it. But you've also got the people who actually want the UK to stay in the EU or have a second referendum are also opposing it. So I really don't understand why she's bringing back the same legislation for a third time. I think if she wants to move people on this, she has to actually change the amendment. It's without any changes to it, I don't see how people should be able to vote for it if they've been opposed to it.
Well, she is. Hold on a second. She's pretty much saying that this is the deal. There is nothing else at this point, and the EU are essentially saying the same thing, that they're not going to renegotiate this. Is she trying to run down the clock here so people will be staring the possibility of no deal in the face, and they will think again and go with the deal that's on the table?
Well, actually, I think that would be a great thing, because it's much better off for the UK to leave without a trade deal. We've already organised most of the small deals, a lot of the transport deals, the airline deals. A lot of things that need to be done have already been done. So I'm not at all frightened of leaving the EU without a trade agreement, which is basically what the withdrawal agreement was meant to be. But it's been turned into a capitulation to the EU. It's not a deal at all. It's a capitulation. So that there's really not any, it's crazy that anyone should vote for it. She's offering them a really bad choice, or leave without a deal, which is actually looking like a much better choice now, and it's only 2 weeks away. So why would anyone give up now? What she's offering is just not Brexit, and it's not good for Ireland, so why not just leave?
Jon Worth, I see you shaking your head furiously there at the possibility of a no deal.
That couldn't be more wrong, what Catherine McBride has just said. Britain is extremely ill-prepared for leaving the European Union with a no deal. It has no idea how it's going to manage to make sure that the ferries should still run at adequate capacity to make sure its goods can still go through Dover-Calais, the main ferry route for exports and imports into the UK. It's been only capable of rolling over about 1/6 of the international agreements that it has with the rest of the world. So it would cause major disruption to Britain's economic relations with its nearest neighbours if it crashed out without a deal. And the irony that there also of what Catherine McBride also just said about the issue in Northern Ireland, you'd have to put a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland if there were a no-deal Brexit to crash out within 2 weeks. So what she's saying is deeply irresponsible, and that's no sensible solution either for the UK or indeed members of Parliament. There are only a hardcore of about 50 hardcore Brexiteers who are foolish enough to contemplate that.
Catherine McBride, I mean, to be fair, the government's own figures have said that there could be a great deal of disruption in a no-deal scenario. What do you say to that?
Well, no, that's not true. In fact, not only are the British ferry companies and Dover ready for this, but the Mayor of Calais, Bertrand, is very, very adamant that he is completely ready for this. This is just not true that we are going to have a problem. The other issue is that no one is going to suddenly change the way they do business, because that's not sensible economics. So the idea that we suddenly need to put up a hard border across Ireland is crazy. It's as if, Irish cattle farmers are happily ready to rustle some, dodgy meat across. It's not going to happen. In 20 or 30 years, there may be some divergence. But right now, sorry?
Let's actually take an example that we know of, right? Let's take an example that we know of. Take the example of Porsche cars. Porsche has already said that any British customers buying a Porsche car in the case of a no-deal Brexit will be charged 10% extra, because that will be the customs levy that will be placed on the import of those cars into the UK in the case of a no-deal Brexit. That has also been confirmed as the tariff that will be put on those cars by the UK government.
And B, look,
do you deny that that's true?
This is a tiny segment of the car market, okay? No, the UK will be in charge of its own tariffs.
Do you deny that that is true?
It will decide.
Do you deny that that is true, that Porsche have done that?
Porsche have said that, but they are assuming that the UK is going to add the same tariff as the EU does.
The UK last week confirmed that it would impose those tariffs on car companies. You are essentially making it up as you go along. You also have rejected what the British customs authorities have said about the Dover-Calais crossing.
I know. I'm sure the two of you can go back and forth on this for
John,
quite some time.
I'm sorry if you're a Porsche driver, but most of the population are not Porsche drivers, and if you can afford a Porsche, you can probably afford another 10% on it.
I want to bring Donnacha Obichoin's take on this, because where Ireland, this has huge implications for the Republic of Ireland, of course, and for Northern Ireland. So I want to get his take on this. Obviously, people in the Republic of Ireland are deeply concerned about Brexit and where it's going and how it's going to affect them. Just highlight for us what are the big concerns there with this and with this whole idea of the Irish backstop and how it affects the agreement, the peace deal with Northern Ireland.
Well, there's a unity of purpose in Dublin in the Irish Parliament. It crosses all parties. The Irish government is a minority government. The ruling party is only a third of the seats in the Parliament, and yet all the parties have united behind a common position in favour of preserving the gains of the peace process and preserving the strong economic relationship we have with the United Kingdom, with the European Union and North and South, and certainly a no-deal Brexit would jeopardise that. It's often neglected as well because the DUP has such a key role in propping up the government of Britain. It's often forgotten that the vast majority of people in Northern Ireland are also favour of this Irish backstop, as it's called, that would essentially preserve a frictionless border unless and until an alternative arrangement could be sorted out. So this is something that unites people north and south, irrespective of their political opinions. And from the beginning, the Irish government's position is that there's no upside to Brexit. It's only a matter of damage limitation. It will hurt the economy. It will hurt the peace process. It has already polarised people in Northern Ireland. When we had tried to put the constitutional issue on the back burner for perhaps a generation to make Northern Ireland work with power sharing. But why would the DUP get involved in a power sharing government in Northern Ireland when they are essentially propping up the whole system in the United Kingdom and indeed have a veto on the whole Brexit process? So this is something, and by the way, there was a recent proposal that came out of Her Majesty's government, which was in the event of a no-deal Brexit, they simply wouldn't more or less levy any customs duties on any goods that are travelling between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And that's nonsense. You can't have two regulatory regimes without somebody policing it. It's just simply an attempt to foist the blame on the European Union or indeed on Dublin for erecting a border when a border is essential. There's two sides to every border. And UK is becoming something of a rogue regime and saying that it won't actually regulate and won't collect tariffs and customs duties on its border.
You talked earlier there about the divisions within Northern Ireland. The Unionists in Northern Ireland are concerned that this backstop, essentially treating the whole island of Ireland as kind of a separate country, that's a big no-no for them, isn't it? Because that's not what they want. To them, that is a path to a united Ireland, isn't it? Isn't that a legitimate concern?
Well, two things there. One, when you say the Unionists have a problem, we were talking primarily here about the DUP, who got about a third of the vote in the last election. Opinion polls suggest that about two-thirds of the population of Northern Ireland want Northern Ireland to stay in the customs union, to stay in the single market. So the DUP are not representing the people of Northern Ireland on this issue. And therefore, I think it's important to stress that at the outset. In terms of prospects of a united Ireland, which is sometimes mentioned, that's something that nobody really wants to address right now. I mean, there has been a demographic shift in Northern Ireland over the years. 4 of the 6 counties in Northern Ireland now have nationalist majorities. Sinn Féin is the largest party in Belfast and in Derry. But I think there was a consensus there. The Good Friday Agreement created an environment where politics could be made to work within Northern Ireland. And as I said, this is now jeopardised by Brexit. And by the way, just on the issue of demarcating the border. And you were saying about Northern Ireland being treated differently. The interesting thing about the British government's proposal is that it would essentially impose tariffs on goods going from Dublin to London, but not between Dublin and Belfast. But Belfast is in the United Kingdom, so Northern Ireland would be treated differently under the proposals put forward by the British government only 2 days ago.
Jon Worth, what should the European Union do here then? I mean, if let's say the British Prime Minister pushes her withdrawal agreement through again and it gets voted down again, how should Brussels respond? Should they grant an extension, and if so, for how long?
Brussels has essentially said it would be okay to grant an extension if there is a good reason to do so. So what would be those reasons? Essentially, the reason that Theresa May is hoping for is that her deal gets voted through next week. I think the chances of that are extremely low. We then come to the other types of reasons that Brussels may be willing to accept. Those would be things, for example, whether Britain wanted a longer period of reflection or a deeper thought about what sort of Brexit direction it wished to pursue, or potentially a new general election or a second referendum. But ultimately, what Brussels wants is an end to this never-ending cycle of no progress. There is very little tolerance for Theresa May's approach in Brussels just now, and Brussels is tired of the never-ending last-minute efforts to try to manage to solve these problems. So Brussels wants clarity from London. It's not fixed as to how that clarity would exactly look.
Catherine McBride, are you not concerned that the so-called hard Brexiteers here are overplaying their hand, that if they don't get behind Theresa May's deal, they could risk losing Brexit altogether? That is essentially what she's saying.
Well, except that what she's offering is not Brexit. What she's offering is an alignment with the EU. So it's not Brexit, and that's the important issue, which is why they're opposing it. I don't think the Irish border is as big a deal as it's been made out, because they already collect excise duty and VAT on the Irish border. There is already a border there. And I do think that the majority of the goods that Ireland exports, not just to the UK, but all around the world, are health service industries, pharmaceuticals. I don't think that they're suddenly going to start doing things differently just because if there's no sort of hard border. I find that this fear tactics that the Remainers keep sort of building up is crazy. It's just not the way people do business these days. Even in goods
the Northern
coming into
Ireland
the
border
UK
would
from
become an
outside the
external border of the EU.
only 1% of things in containers are looked at. And that's Ireland only looks at about 1%, so does the UK when goods come from outside the EU. So the idea that there's going to be this sudden, we must search every border, every package idea of people with clipboards and hats walking up and down, it's just crazy. And yet, in the Irish backstop,
sorry, Mrs. McBride, but your argument
a wet
is
stamp
crazy.
system.
Jon Worth, go ahead.
Why is that crazy? That's actually in the backstop. Have you ever read it? You should read the backstop.
Yes, but
you should read it.
It
actually wants us to go back to the 1950s wet stamp.
Across the board. It is wrong across the board what you are saying. The referendum in 2016
no, it's not.
said Britain
this is what
should
happens.
leave the European
all of these
Union.
statistics are gathered, okay? They do not search cargo the way they used to. They do it all by detective work as such. This idea that every
all right, you made that point,
every
Catherine
container
McBride.
that goes across
We'll let Jon Worth respond to that now.
We have to reject this deceit that is coming from Catherine McBride there. The referendum in 2016 said Britain shall leave the European Union.
You don't even know what you're talking about.
That is what the referendum said. There are 28 countries of the European Union. Britain will no longer be one of those. There are multiple types of Brexit which are possible.
That's what we
Norway
want.
is not in the European Union. Switzerland is not in the European Union. Canada is not in the European Union. Those are all different forms of Brexit.
And America's not in the European Union.
The very idea put forward, exactly, the very idea that
there is that referendum determined how Brexit should look and how far away from the European Union that Britain should be is not correct. The referendum said Britain should leave the European Union, legally speaking. It did not determine what sort of Brexit Britain would get. Britain would leave the European Union, that would fulfill exactly what was said in the referendum, and therefore the issue would simply be done. So therefore you cannot possibly say that the deal that is on the table is actually not a Brexit.
Let's bring in Donnacha Obikoin on that, particularly on the issue of the border between the Republic and Northern Ireland, and whether it should be a hard border or no border or something in between. Is there some sort of a compromise where goods could be subject to checks or others not, or through advances in technology that they've been talking about, of actually still having a border but not a physical one?
Yeah, they've been talking about this for 3 years now, and they haven't come up with a scenario that, you know, essentially is workable or realistic or can meet the needs of people in the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland. And the unfortunate thing is that the border is very, very complicated. There's over 300 crossing points between the north and the south of Ireland. Some of them are very small. If you put that into perspective, on the eastern flank of the European Union, if you go as far north as Finland and as far south as Bulgaria, there's 137 crossing points between the European Union and its eastern flank. So this is a very, very intricate border, and everybody living on both sides of the border, the majorities there, do not want a hard border, and essentially do put the blame on the British government for putting them in this position where they might have to face a hard border. The DUP, who have the ear of London, do not represent a single border constituency. And I dare say the people in the European Research Group who are advocating the position that they're advocating rarely have ever visited the border, and certainly won't feel the effects of a hard border in Ireland. It will be felt by the people of Ireland, who, it should be stressed, never asked for this border in the first place. It was an imposition on the country of Ireland in 1920 against the wishes of the vast majority. And now it's been treated as if the Irish have somehow devised this to thwart Britain's plans of leaving the European Union. It's called the Irish problem or the Irish border problem. It's not our problem. It's a problem that's been foisted upon us, just as Brexit has been.
Catherine McBride, does the UK? I know you want to respond to what Donnacha said there, but does the UK risk breaking up the union with this, with Northern Ireland and possibly Scotland as well, which voted for Remain, that they may decide, well, we've had enough of this, and let's have another referendum and become independent, so that we can stay part of the European Union? Is there a risk there that they will go to Brexit, even if it means breaking up the United Kingdom?
Well, I think that is the whole reason that the people are concerned about the Irish backstop, is to prevent the United Kingdom breaking up. I don't see that the collection of import duties will be so much more onerous than the collection of VAT and excise duty, which happens right now. So I don't see that this is going to suddenly return us to the borders we had in the 80s, 1980s. But I do, the Scottish problem is interesting. I know that they voted 60% to leave versus 40% to remain, but in fact, they also voted 55% to remain part of the United Kingdom in the Scottish independence referendum. So I'm not sure that there is as strong a wish to get out of the UK but get into the EU as you might imagine. There is a very strong group of people who
we're almost out of time now. I'll give the last word back to Jon Worth briefly, and then we're going to have to wrap things up.
So I think that the danger is very high, essentially, that particularly the case for Scotland in the medium term, and potentially also the case for Northern Ireland. Ultimately, the solution for keeping all of the UK together, essentially, and to keep the economic relations between the UK and its neighbours good, would be to have a soft Brexit, a Norway solution, if you like. Basically meaning that the UK would stay in the European Union single market and stay in the European Union customs union. That would mean there would be none of those pressures, none of those dangers, none of the difficulties at the Northern Ireland border, and there you would have your solution.
All right.
That, unfortunately, however, is not a solution that Theresa May has been willing to go for until now.
We're going to have to leave it there. Appreciate you, all three of you, very spirited discussion. Catherine McBride, Donnacha Obikoin, and Jon Worth. Thanks very much for being with us. And thank you for watching Inside Story. As always, you can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for more discussion, you can go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hazem, Sika, and the whole team here. Bye for now.